Welcome to BSG webinars, everyone. My name is Dan Carney, Graphic Design Manager at BSG, coming to you from my home office in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Thanks for joining us. This is our 7th episode. Future episodes are posted on our website, as well as a link to video recordings of our past episodes. The page can be found by going to bsgcraftbrewing.com and clicking on the webinars tile, or going directly to bsgcraft.com/webinars. New episodes will usually air every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. During the holiday break, we will not have a scheduled webinar this Thursday or next Thursday, but stay tuned as we have many more lined up. Throughout the webinar, please ask questions through the Q&A function, center of the toolbar. If we have time, I'll pass some questions along to our guests. You can also send follow-up questions to webinars@bsgcraft.com. So today's speakers are Bob Sutton, VP of Sales and Logistics at Rahr Malting Co, and Aaron Eernisse, Director of Malt Operations at Rahr Malting Co. Their talk is entitled Rahr Malting Co, the history, places, and people behind the malt of reputation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bob to get us started today. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us today. Today I'm going to be talking about the history of Rahr Malting Company. So Rahr Malting began as a brewery that happened to have its own maltings. And this was William Rahr, who came from Weisel, Germany to Manitowoc, Wisconsin in 1847. Manitowoc at that time was a small agricultural area. So he came over, set up a brewery that happened to have its own maltings. There were good barley fields nearby, so that was part of the attraction. But Wisconsin was also attracting an awful lot of other breweries at the same time. You have Miller Brewing Company, who came there in 1855. Pabst Brewing started in 1844. Schlitz in 1849, and many, many others. So it really was kind of a renaissance in American brewing. In 1880, unfortunately, our founder, William, he died in an accident in the brewery, and his eldest son, William Jr., took over running the business, renaming it William Rahr's Sons in honor of their father. They continued to operate the brewery and maltings, and by 1891, the focus had started shifting away from brewing to malting, because there was an awful lot of demand, again, by all these breweries that were starting in the Midwest. By 1891, Anheuser-Busch, Betts & Son, and Blatz Brewing, as well as the Rahr Brewing operations, were taking pretty much all of the product that was being produced at Manitowoc. William Jr. was quite an innovator. He was one of the first to actually install a laboratory in a maltings. Prior to that, most all the lab work on finished malt was done at the breweries themselves. But in a desire to maintain quality and guarantee that quality to their customers, he was among the first to establish a malt lab right at the malt house. Seems like kind of a strange thing to imagine today. He also established the first malt roasting process in the Americas. Prior to this, pretty much all roastings were done in Europe, in the UK, Belgium, Germany. 1900, Maximilian Rahr, William's younger brother, took over the business, took over running the business as president of the company, and he installed the youngest brother, Reinhard, as secretary treasurer. Under the three brothers, the Manitowoc plant was expanded, and by 1911, it was producing 4 million bushels of malt annually. And Reinhardt had a lot of foresight, and he could see that prohibition was coming and was likely to have a very negative impact on the malting and brewing business. So in 1918, he renamed the business Cereal Products Company, and then they began adapting some of the Manitowoc malting facility to be able to produce dairy products, or feed products, and yeast products. 1918 was also the year of the last pandemic we had to live through, the Spanish flu, and could have also driven some of these decisions. 1919, when Prohibition came into effect, the Rahr brewing side did not survive. They closed permanently, but the malting's business carried on as cereal products. And by the end of Prohibition, began converting some of the Manitowoc facility back to making brewer's malt. Guido Rahr Sr., Max's son, became president of the company. By 1935, the increasing demand for Rahr malt products required the construction of a new malt house. There was no room in Manitowoc, plus the barley production area had begun moving westward. So in 1935, they had identified Shakopee, Minnesota as a good site to start building a greenfield malting plant. This site also, because of the commitment to quality, also had its own laboratory on site rather than sending samples back to Manitowoc for assessment. Now, over the years, the Shakopee plant was expanded many times. In 1952, Malt House No. 2 was commissioned. In 1962, Rahr actually sold the Manitowoc facility to Anheuser-Busch, and the general offices were moved to Minneapolis. In 1971, Guido Rahr Jr. became president, the fourth generation to run the company. In 1975, Malt House No. 3 was commissioned, and from 1978 to 1980, the direct fire kilns were all converted to indirect fire kilns. A lot of concerns over nitrosamines being developed in the malt and their discovery that they could be cancer causing forced this. 1980, Malt House No. 4 was commissioned. And in 1994, Malt House No. 5, a tower malting, was added to the site. This made the site one of the largest in the world in terms of malt production. In 2006, the Coda Energy cogeneration plant construction and operation began, and all of the electricity and heat for the Shakopee site is now provided by this cogeneration plant. And in 2016, Malt House No. 6 was constructed, and this is the newest malt house at the Shakopee site. In 1993, Rahr expanded again, this time into Canada, and they built a state-of-the-art tower malting plant in the middle of the Alberta barley production area. And over the past 25 years, this facility has shipped malt around the world, including South Africa, South and Central America, Mexico, across Asia, and into the United States, as well as across Canada. In 2004, Rahr began yet another transformation to focus on the rising craft brewing industry. And they did that by first acquiring Mid-America Brewing Supply, which was a company in Kasota, Minnesota, that was actually bagging Rahr's products. Shortly afterwards, they acquired Brewers Supply, which was a malt distribution company with warehouses in Rhode Island and California. And with that acquisition, they named the group Brewers Supply Group. Now, over the years, this group has grown to be one of the dominant players in the supply of brewing ingredients and packaging materials to craft brewers in the United States, Canada, and other destinations in the world. They include 13 warehouses, 15 transload stations where bulk malt from rail cars is transferred to trucks for delivery to local breweries. Those are indicated by the red circles on this map. And there's also a hop processing plant in Wapato, Washington. In 2016, we further committed ourselves to the craft brewing industry by purchasing Gambrinus Malting, located in Armstrong, BC, which is in the Okanagan Valley of Canada. Great wine country and even better malt country. And Gambrinus is a producer of small batch specialty malts, and its products are distributed not only through BSG, but also shipped worldwide. 2017, we returned to our innovative roots with the opening of the Rahr Technical Center on the Shakopee campus. Now, this facility is dedicated not only to the long tradition of quality control of Rahr's products, but also innovative research into the malting, brewing, and hop production and processing. Since 2014, the Rahr Group has been led by Willie Rahr, the namesake and great-great-grandson of our father, our founder. And we have a saying around Rahr, we raise a glass to thee. And thank you for your time, and I'll be around to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Bob. That was great. We'll probably have some questions afterwards, so stay tuned for after Aaron's presentation, and we'll have the Q&A. Now I'd like to introduce Aaron Eernisse, who will be talking on the general operations of Rahr Malting Co. and Gambrinus Malting. So please welcome Aaron to the webinar. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, Dan. Let us get our screen up here. All right, hopefully everybody can see this. Yeah, so we're going to go through, Bob gave a great introduction in regards to the history and the general operations of Rahr. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail about our facilities and what we do with them in particular. So again, Rahr Shakopee has 6 different malt houses and 8 different kilns, which have spanned about 8 decades now. 4 of those malt houses are a Saladin design malt house. We have the 1 tower malt house. And most recently in 2016, we built our Saladin Tower Malt House, which is kind of a hybrid and really combines all of the technology from the Shakopee campus into one facility. Shakopee is currently the 2nd largest single-site malting facility in the world. However, I think it's important to note that we actually, because of our 6 different malt houses and 8 different kilns, it offers us tremendous flexibility for customer specifications. We also have over 270 different malt and barley bins. This allows us to handle high volumes of varieties and different crop years while still segregating for different analytical properties. It also allows us to experiment and develop. A couple of new items which we're looking at, and you should be seeing coming out soon, are our new Pilsner malts and oat malts. Another thing that's interesting is that our batch sizes here are actually relatively small compared to the size of the plant. And being in Shakopee, and as Bob spoke to, our dedication to quality here at Rahr Malting, we also have access to our technical center on site. It's very easy for any of the maltsters to head down, speak with anybody in our lab or in our technical center to give us direction and kind of work with them. It's great to have them on site here. And I would also say that we have probably some of the industry-leading process controls. Over 175 years of malting and malting history, we've really kind of believe perfected our craft, and that's given us some great benefits from a process control standpoint. Speaking to Rahr and Alix, again, this is a completed in '92. It's a Norden style tower malt house. Norden was later, I believe, integrated into Buehler. One thing to note about our Alix facility is that our barley is actually direct sourced from our farmers. Being in Alix in the plains of Alberta, the low dew points and cool temperatures are ideal for low color, low modification pale malts. We tend to run fewer varieties and larger batch sizes at Alix. However, there's a benefit from long and consistent runs in regards to really dialing in that process and having really good, consistent pale malt. And of course, being basically in the middle of a barley field also has great logistical advantages from a sourcing standpoint. And then Gambrinus Malting, again, came online in February of 2017. They have 2 Saladin-style malt houses. Again, a very kind of European design and style of malt house. They have a very diverse product offering, including but not limited to Pale, Vienna, Munich, and their specialty honey malt. Their small batch sizes really offer us great flexibility to try new things and to become a little bit creative. And aside from that, they also have a bagging facility on site. So any of these one-offs that we decide to do, we can immediately bag and get out to customers very easily. So now going through the basic malting process. I'm not going to go through in full detail from a field all the way through, but just to give a general overview of what we're doing at each of our facilities. One of the most important things we do when barley comes on site is we're going to clean it and grade it. So the grading of barley is the process of separating the kernels based on their size. Now this is very important because kernel size changes the parameters of how the kernel is going to uptake moisture. So if we can segregate barley based on sizing, it can actually change our recipes and how we would then malt it. Again, kind of some examples of the barley grades and how we go about cleaning it. Another big part of barley cleaning and grading would be segregating barley based on variety, on crop year, maybe on growing region, and also on protein, which will again have great analytical effects on down the process and in regards to customer specification. So the first major process in malting is steeping. We're not going to make everything perfect in the steeping process, but we can definitely screw up a batch of malt on the steeping side. So it's really, really critical that we set everything up for the rest of the process. Definitely the most critical stage. Our objectives in the steeping process is to clean and rinse the barley surface. Obviously, there's going to be some dust there. We want to clean all that off, get the barley clean and ready to go. Barley has inherent growth inhibitors, so we definitely want to remove those growth inhibitors with the water, and that's going to allow for proper germination and growth of the kernel. We're looking to hydrate the barley kernels. Again, we're basically just tricking the grain into thinking it's spring. So ideally, we're trying to take the barley moisture from about 13% north of about 40% moisture in our steep tanks. This is an aerobic process, so we're actually looking to provide oxygen to the kernel and remove carbon dioxide. As the grain begins respiring, it's going to be begin producing CO2, and we remove that with fans that are installed on each of the steep tanks to remove that bad CO2 and the air that could potentially cause the grain to asphyxiate. And then another big part is to control temperature to ensure uniform respiration. Again, we're trying to trick the grain into thinking it's spring. Our typical steep temperatures are anywhere from 52 to 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're trying to control that temperature throughout the process. The second stage of the process is going to be germination. This is where rootlets are going to begin to form. We're going to begin to see acrospires. Acrospires are what would become the new plant if we would allow that seed to continue to grow. And really our objectives in germination are to get our enzymes to their optimal level, and then we want to control adequate modification. If we overgrow the grain, it can have certain effects in regards to maybe increasing soluble protein levels too high, or maybe enzyme levels become too high for the specifications that we have. But if we don't modify it enough, we can be on the low end of that, and we could potentially have higher beta-glucans if we don't modify the grain properly in germination. But in the end, we're looking to produce a balanced, homogeneous green malt so that we can send it to kiln. So this diagram kind of outlines analytically what's happening to the kernel throughout the kilning process. So the very first process is what we call the germination phase. Basically, there's enough moisture in the kernel yet that germination is still occurring in the first 2, 3, 4 hours of the kilning process until we remove enough moisture to begin stabilizing the kernel. The second part is what we call the enzymatic phase, and this is really where we're stabilizing that kernel. We're going to see the diastatic power kind of remain stable. Alpha amylase will remain relatively stable during this process, but the moisture is going to see a significant drop off during this enzymatic phase. And then the very last step of kilning is the curing process. And this is where we're going to really create the color. We're going to develop those flavors. And we're really, during the curing phase, trying to drop the moisture in the kernel from about 12% down to about 4% moisture. And that's really where we're going to stabilize that kernel. However, during that time, we're going to see kind of a hit to the diastatic power and alpha amylase, or the enzyme potential in that kernel. So again, there's kind of a balance to temperature and time that we're looking for that changes yearly and with each variety in order to meet all of our customer specifications. Once we're done in the kiln, we're ready to transfer it over to the malt elevator. We're going to be really careful in regards to handling that malt. We're going to use lower speed conveyors. We're going to see a lot more belt conveyors. And really, now that we've made a really good malt, our goal is to protect it and to get it to the customer as clean and safely as possible. So that's a big part of what we're going to do in the malt elevator. We're going to analyze it at that point in time and then develop our blends from there, again, based on each customer specification. And then the last really important cog here at the Shakopee location is Coda Energy. Coda Energy provides both thermal and electrical power to the Shakopee site. They burn natural, non-man-made materials. Typically, we burn oat hulls from General Mills. We'll burn wood byproducts from the local municipalities. That will all be burned in a big suspension boiler. That steam will then be used to power a turbine. That turbine can either put electricity back onto the grid, or it can provide electricity to the facility here at Shakopee. They'll also take some of that steam and we'll put it through a plate and frame heat exchanger and send that heat back to the Rahr Shakopee site for us to use in our kilns. And so when people look at the Rahr bag and they see that we have Rahr malting, the fossil-free malting, the cool dinosaur logo, that's really what that relates to in terms of we're not using natural gas or other fuels in order to power our kilns. So it's really a great facility, and it also provides us tremendous redundancy on site here. For some reason, we would have a power outage at the local electrical supplier, municipality. We can actually run isolated with just Coda providing us with all of our electrical and thermal needs. So it's a great thing to have here on site at Shakopee to provide that. So really, that's kind of my overview of our operations and of Coda and the general malting process. I'm really hoping that we can get some questions, because I'd really love to answer any questions that the folks have for the group here.
Well, thank you, Aaron. That was some good information. I'd also like to bring Bob back. So, we didn't have any questions come through, but, I know there's always a million other things that we can talk about here. And still, when I see any of these presentations or more history and stuff like that on Rahr, I generally will learn something new. There's just so much history. But one question we did have come through just now: grade A, the best malt, most carbs for beer.
The best malt, most carbs for beer. So really, if we're looking for sugar content, essentially for beer, we're going to want to see a barley or a malt variety that's high in what we would call extract. That's typically how we analyze it in our lab. Typically, that tends to be a two-row barley. Two-row barleys tend to be higher in starches and extract. And again, that can also be dependent on the variety and growing region it comes from. It can be dependent on crop year. Can all have a different effect on extract. So that would be my comment to that. Is it completely depends on the barley varieties we're using in the crop year in regards to the highest extract that you can get from a malt.
Yeah, and I'll just add, over time, some of the new varieties have taken us from extract levels. Clagus back in the 90s maybe had extracts around 78.5%. And now with some of the new varieties like Synergy, Connect, we're seeing levels above 82, sometimes even touching 83 on the rare batch. So the breeders have done a really good job in developing varieties that produce more of that extract, which then becomes fermentable material. And farmers as well, through their practices, are being able to produce plumper and plumper barley and lower protein, which again gives us that higher extract, which leads to higher brewhouse yields.
Yeah, and the better job the farmers do, and the better job the barley breeders do, the easier my job is in the malt house. I don't have to push it as hard in the malt house. It naturally it does a better job of modifying in the malt house, and we can really save that extract for the brewers. So they've done a really great job of that.
Yeah. Another good question. Can you describe the differences between Saladin style, Norden style, Tower, and Salad and Tower malt houses?
Yeah, sure. So Saladin malt houses were really kind of the original European-based style malt house, which was cylindrical conical steep tanks. They would then get transferred into a rectangular style germ bed, and then typically go to a rectangular kiln in terms of their design and style. The The tower malt houses were kind of the biggest development. And I would have to say most tower malt houses that I know of were late 80s, early 90s. And now a lot of modern malt houses are tower as well. The concept there is that basically you use gravity to help you transfer the grain through the process. So we're going to take our barley, we're going to send it to the highest part of the malt house. Different styles of steep tanks exist there. But from steep, we're going to then use gravity through a center can, pass it to germination. Most of those germination beds are then circular in nature. There are believed benefits to not having corners from an airflow standpoint in those compartments. And then from germination, they would typically use gravity to then transfer it to the kiln, which would be on the lowest part of the process. Again, we're using gravity to transfer. The Norden Malt House is just really a brand. It's a style of tower malt house. And then 4 years ago now, basically Rahr Malting, we were going to build a new malt house, and we were limited to the space that we had on site. And we said, well, let's just mix the two, combine the two, do a hybrid of both a tower and a salad and malt house. So there we use gravity to feed to each of the rectangular style germination beds. And that was kind of new. We have not seen anything similar yet at this time, but that's what our kind of hybrid salad and tower malt house is in Malt House 6 here in Shakopee.
And I'll just add, you can get those benefits of the circular beds without having to actually put it up into a tower. You'll have malt houses that are essentially unstacked towers where the round germination beds are on the ground, similar to what an old rectangular salad one was.
Thanks, guys. So another good question. Can you talk about where the barley is sourced for Shakopee campus? I know we talked about Alix, but you know, we could touch on Shakopee barley.
Sure, I'll take that. So Shakopee barley comes primarily from North Dakota because that's the most local growing area. I think there's still a few Minnesota farmers hanging on to barley, but you know, most of the farmers, when they can grow corn and soybeans, they're the most productive crops. And this is really why barley had moved further westward over the years. When, as I said in mine, when Manitowoc was built, Wisconsin was a local barley area. There really wasn't much developed west of there. Got to remember, when we built Manitowoc, Wisconsin wasn't even a state yet. So as corn and soybeans have kind of taken over the land area and barley's moved westward, you've also seen malt houses built progressively westward. So we still have barley production in North Dakota and Minnesota. The area is not the most ideal for the two-row varieties that we were using years ago because it's a very disease-intensive area. They get very high humidity, high moisture levels. The soil is like gumbo. It's high clay count. It really holds water, and the barley varieties like Clagis and Harrington just couldn't stand up to those. We are developing new two-row varieties that do well in that area, and you see Pinnacle and Explorer in those areas. So where we can get good two-row in North Dakota, Minnesota, we do because of its proximity. But we still get a lot of Western two-row from Montana and Idaho for the Shakopee plant. On occasion, there'll be some Canadian barley moved down, but you know we're trying to do a lot of direct farmer contracting, even if it has to flow through an outside grain elevator to get to our malt house because we value those direct farmer relationships, and that's hard to do with Canadian in the eastern part, which would feed Shakopee if you're not there all the time.
Right. And Bob, you mentioned barley varieties. One of our questions was, can you talk a little bit about the current barley varieties?
Sure. Well, as I said when we were talking about extract levels, you know, the breeders are developing better and better varieties as we go along. So a breeder's looking at multiple things when he's bringing out new varieties. It's got to be an economic benefit to the farmer. So it's got to be either easier to grow or produce higher yields, and most times a combination of the two. But it's also got to have at least as good of malting and brewing characteristics as the old varieties, if not better. So we're seeing more and more varieties come out especially as craft brewing has taken up such a big role in the not only the brewing world, but also the malt purchasing world. Proportionally, craft brewers buy more malt per barrel of beer than adjunct brewers, and have more desires to have new and unique characteristics, whether they be flavor or local terroir or whatnot. So we're just starting to see kind of an explosion of new varieties that I think will continue, because it's not one size fits all anymore. That doesn't work anymore. So
just following up with Bob on that, in the last, I'd say 3 to 4 years here, we've seen a huge paradigm shift in terms of, specifically in the US and the Midwest, shifting from 6-row to 2-row barleys. Been a lot more planting of 2-row barley, more people asking for it. And that's everybody throughout the kind of the brewing world has really been focusing on 2-row barley. So there's been a huge push to focus on 2-row barley varieties that we can grow in the Midwest and that can handle the conditions. And I think we're really kind of getting into some varieties that do well there. So that's kind of been a huge paradigm shift here recently, is the transition to far more 2-row barley from 6-row.
Sure. Back to the grading question, how you have the grade A, B, C, etc. Would you have more extract than the other grades if it was grade A?
Yes. So typically, A cut or B cut barleys are going to be your highest protein, or sorry, your lowest protein, highest extract barleys. And then your lower, your thinner material is going to tend to be higher in protein. Now, on that sheet, a lot of times the thinner material, the really, really thin material that's not considered brewing grade barley, a lot of times distillers used to take because they wanted a high protein barley for enzyme production. And then if it was really, really thin, it would typically go to feed. But most of the time, again, if you're looking for a little bit higher enzyme punch, some of that thinner barley will have a little bit more protein, but typically your A and B cut barley will be your highest extract or starch count barley.
And then another great question: what do you do environmentally with waste, etc.? I know this is one that we like to talk about. Aaron, I'll let you speak on that. You did touch on Coda Energy, so we can
Yeah.
That.
So a lot of our byproducts, so some of our byproducts here that we create in the process are sent to Coda. A lot of our other byproducts are actually sent to feed. That's another big kind of waste stream. On site, the malting process is also very heavy in regards to water usage. We have our own wastewater treatment facility here on site at Shakopee. In Alix, they actually, Alix and Gambrinus, they actually use the water for irrigation. So again, we do look at all of our kind of waste streams coming out of our facilities and look for kind of the most ideal and sustainable process that which we can use it for when we're done with it. And so that's something that we're continuously working on as part of our sustainability program here, corporate-wide. And I think today we've done a very good job of that. And as I said, Coda is a great example of that as well.
And then somebody asked, can you do organically certified malts?
Yes, we can. We are organically certified. And we have done some recently, in fact, here at Shakopee. So yes, that is an option for us to do at a number of our facilities.
And Gambrinus has a steady organic program going there.
Yep.
And then do you use a SCADA or other to control malting operations? SCADA, SCADA. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I would assume that they're probably speaking to like our actual like control systems.
Sure.
Yeah, we actually use Rockwell Automation's kind of software for the large majority of our controls here in Shakopee. And Rockwell is pretty much, I believe, I can't speak to Alix exactly what they use for their control systems. I believe it's a Rockwell program, but I'm not exactly sure. But that's typically what we use. And again, modern technology, I can hop onto my cell phone and see every malt house on site here and know exactly what the dew point is in kiln number 6 to know exactly where we are from a control standpoint. So again, when I say that I believe we have some of the best controls in the industry, I truly mean that. We have great technology used out in our malt house in regards to controlling our systems.
Yeah. Actually, a question about that. How does process, technology, or batch size affect what malt house makes what product?
Yeah, so a big part of that is malt house and kiln design. So different bed depths create different airflows through the grain. Different kilns might have different high heat capabilities. So that would change where we would put a certain variety. Batch sizes as well are going to have an effect on where we put certain varieties and customer orders or requests in. But there's a lot of different factors that play into where we are going to steep certain varieties and certain customer spec malt to. And a lot of it has to do, again, with different airflows, different batch sizes, different bed depths. We can talk technically for days about how a lot of that stuff works. But for some reason, we never really learn our lesson here at the Shakopee site. We always do something different every decade, so everyone's a little bit different here, but it really is an advantage to us to be able to pick and choose where we want to malt different varieties and for different customers.
Now, I think, another question, 6-row becoming a variety of the past, or more brewers going to 2-row?
Definitely 6-row becoming a variety of the past. AMBA, who is the organization that kind of coordinates the information flow from users, brewers, and maltsters back to plant breeders, has removed 6-row from their recommended list. So we really won't see a lot of new breeding work done in 6 rows. It's like Aaron was talking about, now that we can have these 2 rows that can stand up to disease in the Midwest, there really isn't a need for 6 rows. They tend to be much higher in enzyme, lower in extract, really geared towards adjunct brewers rather than craft brewers. But even the adjunct brewers are seeing good levels of enzymes in 2-row varieties with the added benefit of higher extract. Economically, it makes more sense for them to use 2 rows.
Yep.
Yield-wise for the farmer, he used to take a discount for 6-row, but get higher yield. Now he can grow less 2-row with a higher price and essentially end up at the same gross revenue while not wearing out his equipment. So all in all, I don't hear anybody complaining about the move away from 6-row to 2-row.
That's great. And so then, Aaron, I know that we had teased some new products, and the question was oats?
Yes, so
Yep.
we have produced oats here at the Shakopee site as well as at Gambrinus. So oats are on the horizon. I believe one of my cohorts, Jason McCann, might talk in a little bit more detail. I don't want to steal all of his thunder now, but we have gotten it through the process, and actually it turned out great. So yes, on the horizon.
Yeah, I was going to mention that Jason McCann is an upcoming webinar that will be talking specifically about the new malts and other offerings from Rahr coming out soon. So we're excited to talk about those. I know that. Where does Gambrinus source its barley? How is it different from Rahr Alix?
Actually, it's pretty much the same sourcing area for the barley that is produced in Alberta. We utilize our farmer base, which we built up over years. But Gambrinus also produces a BC-made malt because of a program within British Columbia for distillers. If they utilize an all BC malt, they get a big break on the provincial markups and the excise tax. So we also have barley grown in BC with farmers specifically for Gambrinus. And that also is coordinated by the barley group in Alix.
Well, excellent. And then last but not least, what are the benefits of entering into an LTA versus buying on the spot market, knowing that there is generally sufficient carryover for crop years?
Stability would be the big one. Typically, we don't like to carry barley. It's not like the hops business, which is kind of built on carrying different crop years. In malting, we like to finish one crop year and move on to the next one. What an LTA typically does in malt is locks in the processing portion of the formula. You can, and we do have the ability to contract long-term with our farmers, or you can play the annual spot market and be kind of a commodity trader. Good luck with that. But that's usually the benefit of the LTA is you have that ability to lock in for long terms, a critical raw material. It doesn't mean that, there's not going to be barley or malt not available. There's enough grown that we won't have shortages, unlike, the hottest variety of hops. But it's really is a stability thing, which can be important to a banker. If you're looking for a long-term loan, they like to look that you've managed your risk. And obviously, malt and hops are huge inputs into beer. And, an LTA gives you that option to manage that risk.
Very good. Thanks, Bob.
Anytime.
And with that's the end of our Q&A session, and also the end of our presentation today. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to teach everyone a little something new about Rahr and its history and operations. So, thanks again for sharing your expertise and knowledge with everyone today. If we didn't get to any questions today, please send them to webinars@bsgcraft.com, and we'll work with Bob and Aaron to get you some answers. So if you have any more, please send them along to us. And remember, you can register for future webinars on our website at bsgcraft.com/webinars. And like I said, we're taking a break right now just with the 4th of July holiday season, but we will definitely have a lot more content throughout the summer. So from everyone at BSG, thanks for tuning in. I'm Dan Carney, and I'll see you around. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.